Tycoon confronts ex-wife return with twins after years of abandonment in a luxury villa. Mr. Reed, your 9 a.m. is waiting, announced Eliza, his executive assistant, her voice crisp through the intercom. Alexander sighed. Eyes fixed on the framed photo, he quickly turned face down. 5 years, and still the sight of her smile made his chest tighten. Send them in, he replied, straightening his posture. 3 young entrepreneurs entered, their nervous energy palpable. They were pitching a startup, hoping for a slice of Reed Innovations' legendary investment fund. You have 5 minutes, Alexander said, his voice controlled and measured. Impress me. As they fumbled with their presentation, Alexander's mind drifted to the board meeting from the previous night. The company's performance exceeds all projections, Mr. Reed, the CFO had reported. Stock value up 22% this quarter alone. And yet you still look miserable, his COO James had remarked later over whiskey. You've built an empire worth $8.7 billion. Alex, maybe it's time to enjoy it. Alexander refocused on the nervous pictures. Their technology was promising, an AI application for early disease detection. Normally, he'd dissect every claim, challenge every assumption. Today, he merely nodded. 50 million, 25% stake. My legal team will contact yours. The entrepreneurs looked stunned. They'd expected a grueling interrogation. They'd heard the stories of how Alexander Reed had clawed his way up from nothing, how he'd been abandoned by his alcoholic mother at 12, lived in foster care until working his way through Stanford on scholarships and determination alone. After they left, Alexander walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cool glass. The sprawling campus of Reed Innovations stretched below him, 6 buildings, 5,000 employees, all built from his vision, his relentless drive. Cancel my lunch, he instructed Eliza through the intercom, and have the helicopter ready. I'm heading back to Malibu. 2 hours later, Alexander's shoes echoed through the marble foyer of his coastal villa. 15,000 square feet of architectural brilliance perched on a Malibu cliff, and completely empty save for Mrs. Patel, his housekeeper, who quietly disappeared upon his arrival. He poured himself a scotch and walked to the western terrace overlooking the Pacific. The sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples, colors that reminded him of the abstract paintings Sophia used to create in the villa's East Wing studio, now locked and untouched for 5 years. Another day, another billion, he murmured to himself, a bitter smile crossing his lips. He loosened his tie, feeling the weight of it like a noose. His phone buzzed. James again. I'm not discussing the Singapore acquisition tonight, Alexander answered without preamble. Not calling about that, James replied. The board is concerned, Alex. You haven't taken a day off in 5 years. Not since... Don't... Alexander cut him off, his voice sharp as steel. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're living in that mausoleum, working yourself to death. She's gone, Alex. Sophia left. You need to... Alexander ended the call, tossing the phone onto a nearby chair. The wind picked up, chilling the terrace, but he didn't move. The cold felt appropriate somehow. On his desk inside, buried under quarterly reports and acquisition papers, lay a gold wedding band he couldn't bring himself to put away. 5 years since she'd vanished without explanation. 5 years of throwing himself into work, building an empire that meant nothing without someone to share it with. He mechanically went through his morning ritual. A punishing workout in his private gym, a protein shake that tasted like nothing, a shower hot enough to sting. By 7:15, he stood in his kitchen, scrolling through overnight emails on his tablet, while Mrs. Patel silently placed his breakfast before him. Your mail, Mr. Reed, she said, setting a small stack beside his untouched grapefruit. Alexander nodded without looking up. Bills, invitations to galas he wouldn't attend, investment opportunities he'd pass to his team. The usual. But beneath them all, a cream-colored envelope with his name written in elegant script caught his eye. Not printed, handwritten. He froze, coffee cup suspended halfway to his lips. The handwriting was unmistakable. Is everything all right, sir? Mrs. Patel asked, noticing his sudden pallor. Alexander cleared his throat. "Yes, fine. That will be all." His fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. It bore the logo of Crawford and Blackwell, one of Los Angeles's most prestigious law firms. But it was the handwriting that had stopped his heart. Flowing, artistic strokes that had once signed love notes left on his pillow. Inside was a formal letter on heavyweight stationery. "Mr. Reed, our firm represents Miss Sophia Kim in a matter requiring your immediate attention. Ms. Kim requests a meeting with you at your Malibu residence this Thursday at 2 p.m. The matter is of a personal nature and concerns obligations that have remained unaddressed since your separation. We appreciate your discretion in this matter. Respectfully, Eleanor Crawford." ESQ below the typed text was a handwritten note. "Alex, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." The coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the Italian marble floor. Black liquid splashed across his bare feet, but he didn't flinch. 5 years. 5 years of silence, and now this. Alexander's phone buzzed. "James." "What?" he answered, his voice hoarse. "Good morning to you too, sunshine," James replied. "The Tokyo deal. Cancel my meetings for Thursday. All of them." Pause. "All of them?" "Alex, we have the board presentation on." "I said cancel them." Alexander's tone left no room for discussion. "What's going on?" Genuine concern colored James's voice now. Alexander stared at the elegant handwriting. How many times had he imagined this moment? How many scenarios had he constructed in his mind, ranging from tearful reunions to cold confrontations? Now that it was happening, he felt nothing but a hollow numbness spreading through his chest. "She's back," he said finally. Silence on the other end. James didn't need clarification. "Are you sure that's a good idea? After what she did? Thursday at 2. Clear my schedule." Alexander ended the call. He wandered to his study, the letter still clutched in his hand. From the bottom drawer of his desk, he withdrew a small wooden box he hadn't opened in years. Inside lay the remnants of a life abandoned. A wedding photo, ticket stubs from their first date, a sketch she'd done of him sleeping, and her goodbye note. If you could call 3 words a proper goodbye. "I can't anymore." That was all she'd left. No explanation, no forwarding address, just vanished, as if 5 years of marriage had meant nothing. Alexander had hired the best private investigators money could buy. They traced her as far as a flight to Seoul, then nothing, as if she'd evaporated into thin air. He spent millions searching. Then, after a year of dead ends, he'd stopped, buried himself in work, built an empire while his heart calcified. Now she wanted to see him, here, in the home they'd designed together. Alexander reached for his phone, ready to call his attorney, to arrange for security, to protect himself from whatever scheme she might be planning. His finger hovered over the contact. Then he remembered the way she'd looked at him on their wedding day, eyes full of promise and trust. The way she'd held him when he woke from nightmares of his childhood. The way she'd believed in him when Reed Innovations was nothing but a dream and a mountain of debt. He set the phone down. 3 days. He had 3 days to prepare himself to face the woman who had shattered his heart and then disappeared without a trace. Alexander walked to the window, staring out at the endless blue of the Pacific. Somewhere in the distance, a storm was brewing, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, mirroring the turmoil inside him. "Mr. Reed." Mrs. Patel's voice was tentative as she approached him in the living room. "Would you like me to prepare refreshments for your visitor?" Alexander stared at the geometric art piece hanging on the wall, a replacement for the vibrant canvas Sophia had painted during their first year here. "No," he answered, then reconsidered. "Yes, whatever we have, and then take the rest of the day off." At 1:45, he positioned himself in his office, pretending to review documents. At 1:52, he abandoned the charade and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the driveway. At exactly 2 o'clock, a silver Audi SUV, not a car he recognized, crept up the winding drive. His mouth went dry. The security system chimed, announcing a visitor at the gate. Alexander took a deep breath and pressed the intercom. Send them through, Carlos. He moved to the foyer, standing with calculated casualness beside the Noguchi coffee table. His heart hammered against his ribs with such force he wondered if the sound was audible. The doorbell rang. 3 strides took him to the door. 1 deep breath steadied his hand. The knob turned, the heavy door swung open, and 5 years of practiced indifference evaporated in an instant. Sophia Kim stood on his doorstep, the golden California light haloing her silhouette. At 36, she was more beautiful than he remembered, her black hair shorter now, cutting off sharply at her jawline, her artist's hands fidgeting with the strap of her leather bag. She wore a simple linen dress in a shade of coral she'd always favored. Her eyes, those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, now watched him warily. "Hello, Alex," she said, her voice softer than he'd prepared himself for. Alexander had rehearsed this moment. He'd planned cool detachment, perhaps a hint of professional courtesy. Instead, he found himself speechless, drinking in the sight of her like a man dying of thirst. "May I come in?" she asked when he didn't respond. He stepped aside, a wordless invitation. As she moved past him, her familiar scent, jasmine and something uniquely her, hit him with the force of a physical blow. Memories flooded back. Sophia painting in the sunroom, laughing as he brought her coffee. Sophia asleep against his chest during their flight to Paris. Sophia in their bed, her hair spread across his pillows. Alexander cleared his throat. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes." She turned to face him, standing in the middle of the foyer as if afraid to venture further into the house that had once been hers. "Thank you for agreeing." An awkward silence stretched between them, 5 years wide. "Your lawyer's letter mentioned obligations," he said finally, his tone carefully neutral. "I wasn't aware we had any unresolved financial matters." Sophia's eyes darted to the window, then back to his face. "It's not about money, Alex." "Then what?" The question came out sharper than he intended. 5 years of silence. "And suddenly you need something?" She flinched slightly. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" He laughed, a hollow sound. "I'm not angry, Sophia. Anger requires caring. I moved past that a long time ago." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. She studied his face, seeing through him as she always had. "We need to talk. But first." She glanced toward the open door. "There's someone?" She stopped, corrected herself. "There are people you need to meet." Alexander followed her gaze, confused. Only then did he notice the SUV was still idling in the driveway, its back passenger door now opening. A woman, likely a nanny, stepped out and then bent down as if helping someone small from a car seat. The world seemed to slow as 2 tiny figures emerged from the vehicle. A boy and a girl, holding hands as they looked up at the imposing glass house with identical expressions of wonder. "What is this?" Alexander whispered, his voice barely audible. The children couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The boy wore khaki shorts and a blue polo shirt, his straight black hair falling across his forehead in a way that struck Alexander as hauntingly familiar. The girl's dark hair was pulled into 2 neat pigtails, her sundress the same shade of coral as Sophia's. But it was their faces, those perfect little faces with almond-shaped eyes and distinctive reed jawlines, that turned Alexander's blood to ice. He gripped the edge of the console table to steady himself. "Sophia," he said, his voice dangerous now. "What have you done?" She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'd like you to meet Noah and Mia." Her voice softened as she looked toward the children now making their way up the path. "Your children, Alex." The room tilted. Alexander stared at her in disbelief, then back at the approaching children. The boy, Noah, had his exact expressions, the same serious set to his mouth. The girl, Mia, moved with Sophia's graceful confidence, taking in everything with curious eyes. "That's not possible," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was a lie. The timing fit. The resemblance was undeniable. "I was 8 weeks pregnant when I left," Sophia said quietly. Alexander felt rage bubble up, hot and sudden. "And you didn't think that was something I deserved to know?" "Mommy!" The little girl's voice carried through the open door. Is this our house? It's made of glass. Sophia turned, her face transforming as she smiled at the children. Just a minute, sweetie. She faced Alexander again, her expression pleading. Please, Alex, can we do this inside? I'll explain everything. But not in front of them. He wanted to refuse, wanted to demand answers immediately, wanted to scream at the injustice of it all. But the children were at the bottom of the steps now, looking up at him with innocent curiosity. Mia waved enthusiastically. Noah hung back, studying Alexander with intelligent eyes that mirrored his own. Hi, Mia called. Are you the man from Mommy's pictures? Alexander felt something crack inside him. A fissure in the wall he'd built around his heart. These children, his children, had existed in the world for 4 years without his knowledge. They had his blood, his features. They were his and yet complete strangers. Yes, he managed to say, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. Please, come in. I thought the little ones might be hungry, she said, her curious gaze darting between Sophia and the children. Thank you, Sophia said softly. That's very kind. Alexander nodded stiffly at his housekeeper. That will be all, Mrs. Patel. Once they were alone, an awkward silence settled over the group. Mia, however, seemed immune to the tension as she pointed excitedly at the floor-to-ceiling aquarium that separated the living room from the dining area. Look, Noah, fishies. She pressed her tiny palms against the glass, leaving perfect fingerprints. Can I touch them? No, sweetheart, Sophia said, gently pulling her back. We look with our eyes, not our hands, remember? Alexander watched the interaction, a strange tightness in his chest. This child, this perfect, joyful little human, shared his DNA. The realization was overwhelming. Why don't we go sit down? He suggested, his voice rougher than intended. He led them to the living room, noticing how Sophia hesitated at the entrance. The room had changed since she'd lived here. Her colorful throws and eclectic decorations replaced with minimalist furniture in neutral tones. Noah stayed close to his mother, his intelligent eyes never leaving Alexander's face. The boy's scrutiny was unnerving, like being analyzed by a miniature version of himself. The nanny, Sophia began. Lisa will wait in the car, Alexander completed her thought. Security has been instructed to make her comfortable. Sophia nodded, placing her hand on Noah's shoulder. Mia, Noah, why don't you have your snack while Mommy talks to Mr. Reed for a few minutes? Mia climbed onto the white sofa, cookie already in hand. Is he our friend? Alexander felt his throat constrict. He's someone very important, Sophia answered carefully. Noah remained standing, his small hands in his pockets. Are you the man who builds computers? He asked suddenly, his voice clear and precise. Alexander blinked in surprise. Yes, he answered. Something like that. Mommy has a magazine with your picture. She keeps it in her special box. Sophia flushed. Noah, it's okay, Alexander said, then knelt to the boy's level. I build technology that helps people. Do you like computers? Noah nodded solemnly. I have a tablet. I can read already. He's not exaggerating, Sophia said. They'll be 5 in 3 months, but Noah's reading at a 2nd grade level. And Mia can already play piano pieces I couldn't master until I was 8. Pride swelled in Alexander's chest. Unbidden, unwelcome, yet undeniable. He straightened up. We need to talk. Privately. Sophia turned to the children. Stay right here. Okay? Watch your cartoon on my phone. Mommy will be just over there with Mr. Reed. She handed Mia her phone, already cued to a children's show. The little girl took it eagerly while Noah settled beside her, though his eyes still drifted to Alexander with undisguised curiosity. They moved to the adjoining sunroom, close enough to see the children but far enough for a private conversation. Alexander closed the glass sliding door behind them. Explain, he demanded, his voice low with controlled rage. And make it good, Sophia. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he remembered from their arguments years ago. Where should I start? How about with why you disappeared for 5 years? Only to show up now with children I never knew existed. His hands were trembling. My children, Sophia. My son and daughter. I found out I was pregnant 2 days after our last fight, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Do you even remember what it was about? Alexander frowned. Of course I do. The Beijing expansion. You were upset I had to cancel our anniversary trip. No, she said, a sad smile playing at her lips. It wasn't about the trip, Alex. It was about us. About how you were never really there, even when you were physically present. She looked out at the ocean view. You'd promised to cut back on work, to make time for us to start a family. Instead, you added a Tokyo office and 3 more startups to your portfolio. So you punished me by taking my children away? His voice cracked with emotion. What gave you the right? I was scared, she admitted. When I saw that positive test, I realized something had to change. I couldn't raise children with someone who treated his family as an afterthought. You didn't give me a chance, he hissed. You made that decision for both of us. You're right. She met his gaze directly, and maybe that was wrong. But at the time, I was terrified of bringing children into a home where their father was an absent workaholic who couldn't remember his own wedding anniversary. The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. Alexander turned away, looking through the glass door at the twins. Mia was giggling at something on the phone while Noah had discovered a crystal paperweight on the coffee table and was examining it with intense concentration. They're beautiful, he said, his anger momentarily giving way to wonder. They are, Sophia agreed. Noah's exactly like you, analytical, methodical, always figuring out how things work. And Mia, she smiled fondly. She's pure emotion. She feels everything so deeply, just like you, Alexander finished. Their eyes met briefly, an echo of their old connection before he hardened his expression again. Why now, Sophia? After all this time, why come back? She took a deep breath. Noah was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder 3 months ago. Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. What? Is he? He's stable, she reassured quickly. But he needs specialized care. The doctors need comprehensive family medical history, possible genetic markers. Tests that require. She hesitated. That require your participation. Alexander studied his son through the glass. The boy who seemed so healthy, so perfect. Fear gripped his heart at the thought of anything threatening that small life. You should have come to me immediately, he said, anger returning. Not waited 3 months while my son was sick. I know, she whispered, but it's complicated. I was afraid. Afraid I'd what? Fight for custody? Sue you? Because let me tell you, Sophia, all of those options are still very much on the table. His voice was ice. You kept my children from me for nearly 5 years. There's no court in this country that wouldn't grant me significant rights. Tears welled in her eyes. Is that what you want? To punish me by taking them away? I want the time back, he shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, glancing at the children. I want the first steps, the first words. I want 4 years of birthdays and Christmases and bedtime stories. Can you give me that? A tear slid down Sophia's cheek. No, she whispered. I can't. Their standoff was interrupted by a small knock on the glass door. They turned to find Mia standing there, her little face concerned. Alexander slid the door open. Why are you crying, Mommy? She asked, reaching up to touch Sophia's wet cheek. Sophia quickly wiped her tears. I'm okay, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups get sad when they talk about important things. Mia looked up at Alexander, her head tilted thoughtfully. Are you sad too? Alexander felt something crack inside him as he looked into those innocent eyes. Eyes that somehow mirrored his own. He knelt down, meeting her gaze. Yes, he said honestly. Sometimes grown-ups feel sad and happy at the same time. Like when you find something wonderful that you didn't know you lost. The little girl nodded as if this made perfect sense. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slightly squashed cookie. You can have my cookie, she offered. Mommy says sweet things make sad go away. Alexander gently accepted the cookie, his vision blurring unexpectedly. Thank you, Mia. Noah had wandered over too, regarding the adults with solemn curiosity. Do you live here all alone? He asked Alexander. In this big glass house? The question hit with surprising force. Yes, Alexander answered. Just me. That sounds lonely, the boy said matter-of-factly. Alexander looked up at Sophia, finding her watching this interaction with a complex expression. Hope and fear and something else he couldn't quite name. Yes, he agreed, still holding Mia's cookie carefully. It is lonely. In that moment, staring at the family that should have been his, that still could be his in some form, Alexander made a decision. He would not let anger, no matter how justified, rob him of another day with these children. We have a lot to figure out, he said to Sophia. But right now, Noah needs medical attention. And I need. He looked at the twins, something fierce and protective awakening in his chest. I need to know my children. Sophia's relief was visible. That's all I'm asking for, she whispered. A chance to make this right. For them. As if sensing the shift in mood, Mia tugged at Alexander's hand. Can we see the fishies again? The blue one looks like Dory. Alexander felt the smallest smile tug at his lips, the first genuine smile to cross his face in this house for years. Of course, he said softly. I'll show you all of them. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called, not looking up. James entered, his usual confident stride subdued. You look like hell, he observed, taking in Alexander's rumpled shirt and the dark circles under his eyes. Thanks. Always count on you for honesty. Alexander gestured to a chair. Did you get what I asked for? James placed a thick manila folder on the desk. Everything Blackwood and his team could find. Wasn't easy. She covered her tracks well. Alexander's hand hovered over the folder. Part of him wanted to rip it open, to finally have answers about those missing years. Another part feared what he might learn. You sure you want to go down this rabbit hole? James asked quietly. Maybe just focus on moving forward with the kids. Alexander shook his head. I need to know the truth. All of it. Before I can decide what happens next. As James left, Alexander opened the folder. Inside were detailed reports, bank statements, medical records, photographs. The story they told was not what he'd expected. 3 hours later, as twilight settled over Malibu, Alexander stood on his terrace, phone pressed to his ear. Is Lisa there with them? He asked when Sophia answered. Yes, she's reading them a bedtime story at the hotel. Why? We need to talk. I'll send a car. Alex, it's almost 8. Now, Sophia. His tone left no room for argument. 90 minutes later, she walked through his front door for the second time that week. She'd clearly left in a hurry, her hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing jeans and a simple sweater rather than her usual carefully selected outfits. What's so urgent? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Did something happen with Noah's test results? Alexander led her silently to his office. On the large screen mounted to the wall was a photograph. Sophia in a hospital gown, looking gaunt and hollow-eyed, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. She froze. Where did you get that? Presbyterian Hospital in Seoul. Psychiatric ward. You were admitted 2 weeks after the twins were born. He clicked to another image, prescription bottles, medical records. Severe postpartum depression with psychotic features. 6 months of inpatient treatment. Sophia sank into a chair, her face pale. You had no right. I had every right, he countered. You took my children, Sophia. Did you think I wouldn't investigate? She looked away, her shoulders hunched defensively. So now you know. I was sick. Broken. Is that what you wanted to hear? Alexander softened his tone. Why didn't you tell me? When you first arrived, why let me believe you just left? Because it was easier than the truth. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Easier than admitting I couldn't handle being a mother. that I was so depressed I could barely function. He moved to the window, processing this new information. Your parents took care of the twins while you were hospitalized? Yes, they moved them to Seoul She swallowed hard. When I told them I was afraid I might hurt them. Alexander turned to her, shock evident on his face. Hurt them? I never would have, she said quickly, tears welling. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time they cried, I felt like I was drowning. She looked up at him, raw vulnerability in her eyes. I was terrified, Alex, of myself, of failing them. He moved closer, sitting across from her. On the screen, another image appeared, bank statements showing a nearly empty account. Then large transfers from someone named David Chun beginning 3 years ago. And this? He asked. Financial difficulties? The same Sophia who had access to our joint accounts with millions. She laughed bitterly. I didn't take a penny of your money. Couldn't. Not after what I'd done. So instead you let some stranger support you and my children? David isn't. She sighed. It wasn't like that. He's an old friend from art school. He gave me a job in his gallery when I was finally well enough to work again. The loans were for Noah's initial medical expenses. Alexander leaned forward. Why didn't you come to me then, when Noah first got sick? I tried, she said, surprising him. A year ago, I called your office. Your assistant said you were in Singapore for 3 months. I lost my nerve. She wiped at a tear. And I was ashamed, Alex. So ashamed of how I'd handled everything. He stared at her, seeing beyond the composed exterior to the pain she'd been carrying. The investigator's report had painted a very different picture than the vengeful ex-wife narrative he'd constructed. You suffered alone for almost 2 years, he said softly, with newborn twins. I wasn't thinking clearly. By the time I started to recover, so much time had passed. She trailed off. I convinced myself you'd moved on, that we'd hurt you enough. Alexander pulled up another file. A series of emails, addressed to him, dated throughout the first year after she'd left. Emails that had never reached him. These were found in Marcus Wright's private server, he said. You remember my former assistant? Sophia nodded. Apparently, he was on Technova's payroll the entire time he worked for me. They wanted insider information on Reed Innovations. Alexander's jaw tightened, and he intercepted your emails. All 9 of them. Her eyes widened. You never got them? I fired him 3 years ago for unrelated reasons. These were only discovered during litigation last month. He scrolled through the emails, explanations, apologies, even photos of the newborn twins. You tried to tell me, and I never knew. The weight of lost time hung heavy between them. I didn't leave because I didn't love you, she whispered finally. Alexander rose abruptly, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. You should have tried harder. Found another way to reach me. Something. You're right, she conceded. But depression lies to you, Alex. It tells you that everyone is better off without you. That you're a burden. That you'll only make things worse. She met his gaze directly. I believed it. He moved to his desk, pulling out a small velvet pouch. From it, he tipped a delicate gold bracelet into his palm. A gift he'd given her on their first anniversary. You left this behind, he said, along with your wedding ring. Sophia looked at the bracelet, recognition dawning. I didn't leave them behind. I was wearing them when I went to the doctor that day. The day I found out I was pregnant. Her brow furrowed. They took them when I was admitted to the psychiatric hospital 6 months later. Said they were suicide risks. I never got them back. Alexander closed his fist around the bracelet, pieces clicking into place. So you never intended to leave permanently? No. The simple word hung in the air between them. I went to my parents to figure out how to tell you about the pregnancy. Then the depression started, and everything spiraled. Alexander felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Anger at the circumstances that had robbed them all of years together. Relief that she hadn't simply abandoned them. Guilt that he might have contributed to her mental state with his workaholic tendencies. Noah looks exactly like you did in your baby pictures, Sophia said softly, breaking the silence. "I kept expecting you to show up one day, having tracked us down, to demand answers. I stopped looking after a year," he admitted. "The investigators said you'd vanished completely. I thought," he hesitated, "I thought you must really hate me to go to such lengths." She shook her head sadly. "Never. I was just lost." Alexander moved to the window, looking out at the night ocean. "Noah needs treatment that only a few specialists in the country can provide. The best one is right here in Los Angeles." "I know. That's part of why I came back. His doctor in Seoul referred us." He turned to face her. "The twins need stability, a proper home during his treatment." Sophia tensed. "Alex, if you're suggesting taking them from me—" "That's not what I'm saying." He took a deep breath. "The east wing of this house has 5 bedrooms. It's separate enough to give you privacy, but would allow the children to have proper space. A yard, the pool." He paused. "And both parents." Her eyes widened. "You're asking us to move in?" "For Noah's sake," he clarified quickly. "His treatments could take months, possibly longer. Hotel living isn't ideal for children." "And what about us?" she asked carefully. "What are we to each other in this arrangement?" Alexander's expression remained guarded. "Parents. That's all we need to be right now." Sophia studied him, clearly trying to read between the lines. "The children will have questions. We'll answer them truthfully, age-appropriately." He straightened his shoulders. "But let me be clear. I'm not just letting you back into my life, Sophia. This is about Noah's health and giving my children what they need." She nodded slowly. "I understand." "Do you?" His voice hardened slightly. "Because while I understand now that you were ill, that doesn't erase the fact that decisions were made that can't be undone. Time that can't be recovered." "I know," she whispered. "I live with that regret every day." They regarded each other across the room. Two people who had once shared everything. Now virtual strangers connected only by the tiny humans they'd created together. "One more thing," Alexander said. "This David Chun. What exactly is your relationship with him?" Sophia hesitated. "He's been supportive. A friend when I needed one. Just a friend." "He wants more," she admitted. "But I've kept things professional." Alexander nodded, filing this information away. "He can't be involved with the twins while you're here. I won't have my children confused about who their father is." "They know who their father is, Alex," she said firmly. "Even before they met you. I've shown them your pictures, told them stories about you. They've always known." Something in his chest tightened at this revelation. That even in his absence, Sophia had kept him present in their lives. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring them here tomorrow morning. We'll set up the East Wing and get them settled before Noah's first appointment on Friday." As he walked her to the door, an awkward moment passed between them, the muscle memory of a goodbye kiss that would not come. "Thank you," Sophia said, "for giving us this chance." Alexander nodded stiffly. "This doesn't fix the past, Sophia, but it might give them a better future." After she left, he returned to his office, staring at the medical images on the screen. His son, his beautiful, serious little boy, was fighting a battle inside his own body. Anger and recrimination suddenly seemed like luxuries he couldn't afford. He picked up his phone and dialed. "James, I need you to clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks and find out everything you can about a man named David Chun, art gallery owner, possibly connected to investors in Seoul." He paused. "And one more thing. Call Rivera Design. The East Wing needs to be renovated. Children's rooms. I want it done by tomorrow night." As he hung up, Alexander looked at the bracelet still clutched in his hand. A relic from a life that had shattered years ago. He placed it carefully in his desk drawer. Between the children's rooms, a former meditation space had become a playroom with the latest educational toys. Nothing had been spared, from custom furniture to top-of-the-line air purifiers installed specifically for Noah's condition. Mr. Reed, his new assistant, Rebecca, appeared at the doorway. "They've arrived." Alexander straightened his casual sweater and jeans, an outfit he'd deliberated over for longer than any board meeting attire. Show them in. He waited in the central living area of the East Wing, hands clasped behind his back. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see his driver helping unload suitcases while Sophia held Noah's hand. Mia was already running toward the door, her excitement visible even from a distance. The glass doors slid open, and Mia burst through. "We're here. Mommy said we get to stay in the glass castle." Alexander found himself smiling despite his resolve to maintain emotional distance. "It's not exactly a castle, but I hope you'll like it here." Sophia followed with Noah, her expression cautious. She wore a simple sundress and minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, so different from the fashion-conscious woman he'd married. Somehow, this more natural version of her affected him more. "This is excessive," she said quietly, taking in the completely renovated space. "The children deserve the best," he replied simply. Noah stepped forward, his eyes wide as he surveyed the space. "Is this all for us?" Alexander knelt to the boy's level. "Would you like to see your room? I heard you like space." Noah's serious expression brightened slightly. "I know all the planets, and dwarf planets too, even Eris." "That's impressive," Alexander said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Your room is this way." As he led Noah down the hallway, he glanced back to see Sophia watching them, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He hardened his resolve. Those tears didn't erase 5 years of secrets. "Oh, a piano!" Mia's delighted shriek echoed from her discovered bedroom. "Mommy! Mommy! Come see!" The morning unfolded in a flurry of exploration and settling in. By noon, the children were investigating the child-proof terrace while Alexander led Sophia through the more practical aspects of their arrangement. "Noah's specialist appointments are scheduled for Tuesdays and Fridays," he explained, showing her the detailed calendar he'd created on a tablet. "I've arranged for a private nurse to be on call 24/7, and Dr. Krishnan has agreed to make house calls if necessary." Sophia stared at him. "How did you get Krishnan? His waiting list is over a year long." Alexander's expression remained neutral. "I made a significant donation to his research foundation." "Of course you did," she murmured, but there was no malice in her tone, only a weary acceptance of his efficient problem-solving. "The children's wing has its own security system," he continued. "You'll each have personalized access codes. The pool area has been equipped with advanced safety features, and the grounds are monitored continuously." "You've thought of everything," Sophia said, a note of suspicion creeping into her voice. "Why, Alex? Why go to all this trouble for a temporary arrangement?" He met her gaze directly. "Our son is sick. Nothing else matters right now." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away to take the call. "Mr. Reed." His attorney's voice came through the line. "We've reviewed the strategy you requested regarding potential custody arrangements." And Alexander kept his voice low, glancing at Sophia, who was now arranging family photos on a shelf. "California law strongly favors the documented primary caregiver, which has been Ms. Kim for the children's entire lives. However, given her history of mental health issues and the gap in contact, we could build a case, especially if we can demonstrate instability during the observation period you mentioned." "Keep working on it," Alexander instructed. "I want a comprehensive strategy on my desk by next week." When he returned to Sophia, her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the shift in his demeanor. "Work?" she asked. "Something like that," he replied. "We should discuss the terms of this arrangement more formally." She tensed. "Terms?" Alexander gestured to the seating area, waiting until she sat before continuing. "I propose a 3-month trial period. You and the children will live here, giving Noah access to the best medical care while allowing me to build relationships with both children. During this time, we'll work out a more permanent arrangement for co-parenting." 3 months, she repeated, considering. "And after that?" "After that, we'll reassess based on Noah's medical needs and what's best for both children." His tone was measured, giving nothing away of his true intentions. Sophia studied him. "And what about our past? Everything that happened?" I'm not interested in rehashing old wounds, he said coldly. This isn't about us. It's about Noah and Mia. A flash of hurt crossed her face before she masked it. Agreed. The children come first. Good. Then there's one more thing. Alexander leaned forward. While you're living here, I'd appreciate transparency about your personal life. Her eyebrows rose. Meaning I don't want strange men visiting my home. The children have enough to adjust to without adding complications. You mean David, she said flatly. Alexander shrugged. Him or anyone else. The children need stability, not confusion. That's rich coming from a man who had a different date at every gala we attended. Sophia shot back, then immediately closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. The past is the past, right? Right? He agreed, though the comment stung more than he'd expected. A moment of awkward silence stretched between them before Sophia spoke again. I'll agree to your terms, Alex. 3 months. But I have conditions of my own. Such as, you can't shut me out of decisions regarding the children. We make them together as equals. Alexander nodded. Reasonable. And you need to commit to spending actual time with them, not just hiring people to watch them while you work. They need a father, not a financial resource. The criticism hit its mark. I'm clearing my schedule. The Singapore expansion can wait. Surprise flickered across her face. She clearly hadn't expected him to sacrifice work so readily. There's something else you should know, she said more softly. Noah has been asking questions about why he doesn't have a daddy like his friends. He's sensitive about it. Please be patient with him. Alexander felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. I'll follow your lead on how to approach this with them. Sophia tilted her head, clearly puzzled by his conciliatory tone. Thank you. From the terrace came the sound of children's laughter. Mia had discovered the small fountain and was delightedly splashing her hands in the water while Noah watched cautiously from a safe distance. She's fearless, Alexander observed. He's more calculated. Just like their father, Sophia said quietly, then caught herself. I should check on them. As she walked away, Alexander watched her interact with the children, gentle but firm, attuned to each child's needs without hovering. Despite his suspicions about her past stability, he couldn't deny she was a good mother. That would make his eventual custody case more challenging. Later that evening, after the children were settled into their new rooms, Alexander retreated to his office. He opened a new document on his computer and began typing. Day 1 of observation. S appears competent with children. No signs of current mental health issues. Note, look into medication history, possible relapses in the past 3 years. Noah shows signs of attachment anxiety. Potential result of unstable upbringing? Mia more adaptable. Both children exceptionally intelligent. Priority. Build trust with N and M while documenting S's parenting patterns. He saved the file in an encrypted folder labeled Project Homecoming and closed his laptop. On his desk lay the initial report from the private investigator he'd hired to look into David Chun. The man was more than just a gallery owner. He was a significant investor in Asian tech markets, with specific interests that overlapped with Reed Innovations' territories. A coincidence? Alexander doubted it. In his experience, there were no coincidences in business or in life. His phone buzzed with a text from James. Security reports movement in East Wing. Child wandering. Alexander frowned and quickly made his way through the house. In the dimly lit hallway connecting the wings, he found Noah in spaceship pajamas, clutching a worn teddy bear and looking disoriented. Hey buddy, Alexander said softly, kneeling down. Are you okay? Noah's eyes were wide and fearful. I don't know where the bathroom is, and it's too dark. That's an easy fix, Alexander said, gently taking the boy's small hand. There's one right in your room, but I can show you a closer one. As he led Noah to the nearest bathroom, he felt the tiny fingers tighten around his own, a gesture of such simple trust that it made his chest ache. Is this your house forever? Noah asked as they walked back to his bedroom. Yes, Alexander answered. Do you like it here? Noah considered the question with endearing seriousness. It's big, and there are too many windows. Alexander chuckled. Too many. Mommy says we need privacy. That's why we had curtains at our old house. We can add curtains wherever you want them, Alexander promised. Noah stopped at his bedroom door, looking up at Alexander with eyes that mirrored his own. Are you my dad? The direct question caught Alexander off guard. He knelt down, bringing himself to Noah's level. Yes, he said simply. I am. Why didn't you live with us before? Alexander's heart hammered in his chest. It's complicated, Noah. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But I'm here now. Noah processed this, his little brow furrowed in concentration. Will you leave again? No, Alexander said firmly, surprised by the fierceness of his own response. I won't ever leave you or Mia. That's a promise. Noah nodded solemnly. Okay. He turned to go back into his room, then paused. Mommy cries sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping. Will she stop crying now that we're here? The innocent question struck Alexander like a physical blow. I hope so, buddy. I really hope so. After tucking Noah back into bed, Alexander stood in the hallway, his calculated plans suddenly feeling hollow. The child's simple questions had cut through his defenses more effectively than any of Sophia's explanations. Back in his office, he stared at his laptop but couldn't bring himself to open the observation file he'd started. Instead, he found himself searching through old photographs, digital memories from happier times. Sophia painting on the terrace, their honeymoon in Greece, her head thrown back in laughter at some forgotten joke. His phone rang, James again. The background check on Chun came through, his friend said without preamble. You're not going to like it. Alexander straightened. What did you find? He's on the board of Technova's Asian subsidiary, the same company that had Marcus spying on you. Alexander's blood ran cold. So this isn't a coincidence. Not a chance. Chun has been investing in companies competing directly with Reed Innovations for years. And he specifically sought out Sophia's gallery 3 years ago, right after you announced the Asian expansion. The implications were staggering. Had Sophia been part of industrial espionage? Or was she an unwitting pawn in Chen's game? Either way, the danger to both his children and his company suddenly seemed very real. Double the security detail, Alexander instructed, and get me everything you can on Chen's movements for the past 3 years. Every meeting, every phone call, every email. As he hung up, Alexander glanced toward the east wing where his children slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing. The custody documentation no longer seemed merely strategic. It had become potentially urgent. Tonight, he stood at the kitchen island, watching as Sophia prepared the twins' favorite Korean dishes. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, chopping vegetables and seasoning meat while humming softly, a melody he recognized from years ago. You still sing that song, he observed, the words escaping before he could stop them. Sophia looked up, momentarily surprised. I hadn't realized I was singing. Bach's Prelude in C major. You used to hum it while you painted. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps nostalgia. The twins like it. It calms them before bed. Alexander nodded, unsure why the simple observation had created such tension between them. He reached for his wine glass, accidentally brushing her fingers as she passed him a plate. The brief contact sent an unexpected current through him, muscle memory from a time when such touches were commonplace. Pass me the blue, Sophia had said, her voice dreamy with concentration. She stood before a massive canvas in the sunroom, barefoot and splattered with paint, her hair piled messily atop her head. Alexander, then just 32 and preparing for his first major investor meeting, glanced up from his laptop. Which blue? There are about 12 tubes here. She had laughed, the sound echoing through the sunlit room. Ultramarine, the one that looks like the ocean at midnight. He'd handed her the tube, then surprised himself by setting aside his work. He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder to study the emerging artwork. "It's incredible," he'd murmured, genuinely awed by her talent. She'd leaned back into him, her body fitting perfectly against his. "You're just saying that because you're contractually obligated. I'm saying it because it's true. You're brilliant, Sophia Kimreed." She turned in his arms, paintbrush still in hand, leaving a streak of blue across his expensive shirt. "Oops," she'd giggled, not looking remotely sorry. "You did that on purpose," he'd growled playfully, then kissed her deeply, not caring about the paint or his ruined shirt or the investor meeting just hours away. "Alex, did you hear me?" Sophia's voice pulled him back to the present. She was looking at him expectantly, holding out a plate of japshi for him to taste. "Sorry," he said, taking the offered fork. "Mind wandered." "To where?" she asked, her tone cautious but curious. He considered deflecting, but something compelled him to answer honestly. "The sunroom, that huge abstract you were working on for the San Francisco exhibition. You ruined my favorite Armani shirt with ultramarine blue." Surprise widened her eyes. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he said quietly, then immediately regretted the admission. He cleared his throat. "It's good," he added, nodding to the food. "The kids will like it." Sophia studied him for a moment before returning to her cooking. "Mia asked about your parents today." The abrupt change of subject caught him off guard. "What did you tell her?" "That her grandfather died before she was born, and her grandmother lives far away. I didn't mention that she's in a memory care facility or that you haven't spoken in 15 years. Alexander's jaw tightened. His estrangement from his alcoholic mother was not something he discussed, even with Sophia during their marriage. "Thank you," he said stiffly. "That was appropriate. She wants to know her family, Alex. Both sides. She's at that age." He nodded, acknowledging the truth of this but unwilling to discuss it further. Instead, he helped her set the table, an oddly domestic task that felt both foreign and familiar. After dinner, as Sophia supervised the twins' bath time, Alexander retreated to his study to review the latest intelligence on David Chun. The reports confirmed his suspicions. Chun had methodically positioned himself in Sophia's life shortly after her return to work. His gallery had offered her a job despite her gap in employment, provided an apartment in the building he owned, even arranged special care for the twins when Noah's symptoms first appeared, all while secretly sitting on the board of Alexander's chief competitor. "Too many coincidences," Alexander muttered, making notes. His investigation was interrupted by a soft knock. "Come in." Mia peeked around the door, her wet hair wrapped in a towel, wearing pink unicorn pajamas. "Mommy said to say good night." Alexander smiled despite himself. "Did she now?" Mia nodded solemnly. "She said you're busy with important work, but I should say good night anyway because that's what families do." The simple statement hit him with unexpected force. "She's right," he said, rising from his desk. "I'm never too busy for good night." He followed Mia to her room where Sophia was already tucking Noah into the second bed. They had discovered that despite having separate rooms, the twins preferred to sleep in the same space. A habit developed, Sophia explained, during her depression when the nanny had found it easier to monitor them together. "Story time," Mia announced, climbing into her bed. Sophia glanced at Alexander apologetically. "I told them you might be too busy." "I can stay," he interrupted. "If that's okay." Noah's eyes lit up. "Can you read the space book?" As Alexander settled into the chair between their beds, an odd sense of rightness washed over him. This simple act of reading to his children felt more significant than any business deal he'd ever closed. He read about distant planets and drifting comets, answering Noah's surprisingly insightful questions while Mia slowly drifted off, her small face peaceful in sleep. When he finished, Noah's eyes were heavy but still open. "You read the science parts, right?" the boy said approvingly. "Mommy always skips the hard words." Alexander chuckled. "The hard words are often the most important ones." Noah nodded seriously. "That's what I think too." As Alexander leaned down to adjust Noah's blanket, the boy reached out and touched his face gently. "Your eyes look like mine." "They do," Alexander agreed, his throat suddenly tight. Mommy has a picture of you by her bed. Noah continued, his voice growing sleepy. The one where you're at the beach. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. Alexander froze, unsure how to respond. He glanced up to find Sophia standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of embarrassment and something more complex. Time to sleep, buddy, Alexander said softly, brushing Noah's hair back from his forehead in a gesture that felt instinctual. Once both children were asleep, he followed Sophia into the hallway. I'm sorry about that, she said quickly. Kids say the most random things. Is it true? He asked, his voice low. You kept my picture? Sophia looked away. It was for the twins, so they'd know what you look like. Liar, he thought, but without the anger he'd expected. Instead, he felt a strange ache in his chest. I'll check on them before I go to bed, he said, changing the subject. Noah sometimes has nightmares after his treatments. I know, she said softly. But thank you. An awkward silence fell between them before Sophia spoke again. You're good with them. Better than I expected. What did you expect? He couldn't help asking. The Alexander the First knew lived for work. Rescheduled our anniversary dinner 3 times because of conference calls. Missed my father's funeral because of an IPO. The words held no accusation, just a stated fact. The memory surfaced with painful clarity. Her tear-streaked face as she'd boarded the plane to Seoul alone. His promise to follow the next day once the offering was complete. He never made it. The IPO had complications. By the time he arrived, 3 days late, something fundamental had shifted between them. He was my father, Alex, she'd said, her voice hollow with grief and disappointment. The only thing I asked was for you to be here with me. I'm here now, he'd replied, not understanding the depth of the wound he'd inflicted. Too late, she'd whispered. Always too late. That had been 8 months before she left. The beginning of the end, though neither recognized it at the time. I was obsessed with building something that would last, he admitted now, surprising himself with the candor. After growing up with nothing, security became everything. I know, Sophia said, her expression softening. I understood that about you. I just thought, eventually, I'd become a priority too. The honesty hung between them, painful but somehow cleansing. Well, she said finally, breaking the tension. Good night, Alex. Good night. He watched her retreat to her room at the end of the hall, realizing with a jolt that he'd been so focused on investigating her possible connection to Chun that he'd failed to consider another explanation. Perhaps Chun had targeted Sophia precisely because of her connection to Alexander. Later that night, unable to sleep, Alexander found himself wandering the house. He paused outside the twins' room, listening to their soft breathing, then continued to the large storage closet at the end of the east wing. Inside, wrapped carefully in protective coverings, were Sophia's paintings, works he couldn't bring himself to remove after she left. He uncovered one. A large canvas depicting a man standing at a window, his back to the viewer, silhouetted against a storm-tossed sea. He recognized himself in that lonely figure, though Sophia had painted it years before her departure. Why do you always paint me from behind? He'd asked once. Because that's how I most often see you, she'd answered. Walking away, focused on the horizon, always looking toward the next achievement. That's not fair, he'd protested. It's not a criticism, she'd said, brushing a gentle hand through his hair. It's what makes you who you are. You see possibilities others don't. I just sometimes wish you saw what was right beside you with the same clarity. The memory stung with prophetic truth. He had built an empire while losing his family. The irony wasn't lost on him. He carefully recovered the painting and returned to his bedroom. On his nightstand, a framed photo of the twins, taken during their first full day at the villa, now sat beside his phone and tablet. He picked it up, studying their small faces, seeing himself in Noah's serious expression and Sophia in Mia's joyful grin. Alexander placed the photo back on the nightstand and opened his laptop. The file titled Project Homecoming stared back at him. He had started it as documentation for a potential custody battle, but as he reviewed the notes from the past week, he found himself adding observations that had nothing to do with legal strategy. Noah prefers the crusts cut off his sandwiches. Mia hums when she draws, just like her mother. They both sleep with their hands under their cheeks. Noah asked about constellations. Schedule observatory visit? Mia played Twinkle Twinkle on the piano by ear after hearing it only twice. He paused, cursor blinking at him, then added one more note. S appears to have been an excellent mother despite everything. The children are well-adjusted, intelligent, and secure in her love. Whatever happened in the past, she has clearly prioritized their well-being. It wasn't the kind of documentation his lawyers had requested. It wasn't strategic, but it was true. Alexander closed the laptop without saving the file. The custody battle he'd been planning suddenly seemed premature at best, vindictive at worst. First, he needed to understand the full truth about David Chun and his interest in Sophia and the children. Because if Chun had targeted his family as a way to get to him or his company, Alexander would make certain the man regretted ever hearing the name Reed. Sleep eluded him as memories continued to surface. The good and the bad, the love and the failures, the moments when they'd been truly happy and the slow fracturing that led to their collapse. The mistake, he was beginning to realize, had been believing that success could compensate for presence, that providing could substitute for participating. Noah's innocent question echoed in his mind. Why didn't you live with us before? The answer was both simple and devastatingly complex. Because he had failed to understand what truly mattered until it was gone. He sat in the home office, reviewing quarterly projections, when a small shadow appeared in his doorway. Noah stood there, clutching a tablet and watching him with that unervingly serious expression that mirrored Alexander's own. Mom said I shouldn't bother you, the boy said quietly. But I have a question. Alexander set aside his work immediately. You're never bothering me. Come in. Noah approached cautiously, as if entering a sacred space. His eyes roamed over the multiple monitors, the holographic display of global market data, the advanced equipment that formed the nerve center of Alexander's home operations. Is this where you make computers? He asked, his voice hushed with reverence. Alexander smiled. Not exactly. This is where I decide what kinds of technology my company will build next. The actual making happens in our factories. Noah nodded, processing this information. I read about your neural interface, the one that helps paralyzed people walk again. Alexander couldn't hide his surprise. You read about that? That's graduate-level bioengineering. The boy shrugged. Mom got me books from the library, and there was an article about you in Scientific American. I didn't understand all the words, but I got the important parts. Something warm and unfamiliar expanded in Alexander's chest. Pride, yes, but something deeper too. Connection. Recognition of himself in this small, serious person who shared his curiosity and analytical mind. Would you like to see how it works? He asked. Noah's eyes widened. Can I? Alexander pulled a chair beside his own and lifted Noah onto it. He opened a secure project folder on his main computer, revealing detailed schematics and simulation models of Reed Innovations' breakthrough neural interface technology. This, he explained, pointing to the complex design, is how we help the brain talk to the body again when the normal pathways are damaged. For the next hour, Alexander found himself explaining advanced biotech concepts in terms a 4-year-old could understand. And to his amazement, Noah not only followed along but asked astute questions that occasionally gave even Alexander pause. Why don't you make it smaller? Noah asked, pointing to a component. If it was smaller, it wouldn't need so much power. Alexander stared at his son, then back at the schematic. The boy had identified an efficiency issue that his entire R&D team had been wrestling with for months. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out, he admitted. It's a very smart observation. Noah beamed at the praise, his usually serious face transforming with a smile that squeezed Alexander's heart. Dad, the word, used for the first time, hung in the air between them. Can I come here again tomorrow? I want to learn more. Alexander swallowed hard. Dad had never sounded so significant. Anytime, My door is always open for you. Noah nodded, satisfied, and slid off the chair. At the doorway, he paused. Mom says I'm like you. She says that's why I think about things so much instead of playing. Is that okay with you? Being like me? Alexander asked carefully. Noah considered this with endearing seriousness. I think so, but Mom says I should try to have fun too sometimes. Your mom is very wise, Alexander said, surprised by how easily the compliment came. After Noah left, Alexander sat motionless, the projections forgotten. Something fundamental had shifted during that hour. Something that made his earlier suspicions and custody plans seem not just unnecessary but almost offensive. His contemplation was interrupted by the sound of piano music. Simple but beautiful notes floating down the hallway. Curious, he followed the melody to find Mia at the baby grand in the living room, her small fingers moving confidently across the keys. He stood silently, watching his daughter play. Unlike Noah's methodical approach to everything, Mia threw herself into the music with abandon. Eyes closed, swaying slightly, completely immersed in the experience. When she finished, he applauded softly. Mia spun around, her face lighting up. Did you hear me play? She asked excitedly. Miss Peterson taught me yesterday. It was beautiful, he said, genuinely impressed. You've only had one lesson? Mia nodded proudly. I practice lots. Mommy says music is in my bones. He moved closer, sitting beside her on the bench. My mother played piano, he shared, surprising himself with the personal disclosure. She taught me a little when I was young. Can you play with me? Mia asked, her eyes hopeful. Alexander hesitated. He hadn't touched a piano in decades. Not since his mother's drinking had worsened and music had disappeared from their small apartment along with everything else good. I'm very rusty, he warned. That's okay, Mia said, patting his arm reassuringly. I'll help you. And somehow, he found himself playing heart and soul with his daughter, her tiny fingers complementing his halting ones, her delighted giggles when he made mistakes washing away decades of painful associations with the instrument. When they finished, Mia threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive hug. We're good, she declared. Alexander froze momentarily, then carefully returned the embrace, his large hands gentle against her small back. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and children's watercolor paints, and something about the combination made his eyes sting unexpectedly. Yes, he managed. We are. Mia pulled away and reached into the pocket of her dress, producing a folded piece of paper. I made this for you, she said, suddenly shy. Teacher says we should draw our families. Alexander carefully unfolded the paper. The childish drawing showed 5 figures standing in front of what was clearly meant to be the glass villa. 2 small figures. One in a blue shirt, Noah. One in a pink dress, Mia, stood between 2 taller figures labeled Mom and Dad. The 5th figure, slightly apart, was labeled Lisa, the nanny. Do you like it? Mia asked anxiously. Alexander stared at the simple drawing, the first depiction of a family he'd been part of since his own childhood artwork had hung on his mother's refrigerator decades ago. I love it, he said, his voice thick. May I keep it? Mia nodded solemnly. You can put it in your office with your important things. I will, he promised. This is very important to me. Later that evening, as Sophia prepared dinner, Alexander found himself telling her about his day with the children. Noah understands complex engineering concepts, he said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. And Mia, her musical ability is extraordinary. Sophia smiled as she chopped vegetables. I told you, they're both exceptional in their own ways. They're perfect, he said simply, then caught himself. Such unguarded sentiment was unlike him. Sophia's knife paused mid-chop. She looked up at him, something vulnerable in her expression. They missed so much not having you in their lives, she said quietly. And you missed so much too. The statement hung between them, not an accusation, but a recognition of the tragedy of lost time. I won't miss any more, Alexander said firmly. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Alexander sat in his office staring at Mia's drawing, now framed and placed prominently on his desk. Beside it lay the latest intelligence report on David Chun, evidence of multiple meetings with Technova executives in Seoul during precisely the same period he'd been helping Sophia. The contrast between the pure innocence of the drawing and the calculating manipulation documented in the report filled Alexander with cold fury. Someone had been using his family, his children, as pawns in a corporate espionage game. His phone rang. "James, we've found something," his friend said without preamble. Chun made 3 transfers to Sophia's account over the past year, totaling just over $200,000. Alexander's grip tightened on the phone. What for? That's what's interesting. Each transfer coincided with one of Noah's hospital stays. The money went directly to medical accounts. Alexander frowned. So he was helping with Noah's medical expenses. Yes, but here's the thing, the treatments Noah was receiving in Seoul were experimental prototypes of your company's neural regeneration therapy. The same technology you've kept under wraps for 3 years. Alexander went completely still, the implications crystallizing. Chun was using my son as a test subject for stolen technology. It looks that way, James confirmed grimly. The question is, did Sophia know? Alexander stared at Mia's drawing, the happy family she'd created on paper, so at odds with the ugliness he was uncovering. "I need to know everything," he said coldly. "Every detail about those treatments, every conversation between Chan and Sophia, every doctor involved." As he hung up, Alexander heard soft footsteps in the hallway. He opened his door to find Sophia walking past, clearly heading to check on the children. "Everything okay?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral despite the storm brewing inside. She startled slightly. "Just my usual midnight check. Noah sometimes has fevers after treatment days." Alexander nodded, studying her face for signs of deception, finding only maternal concern. "I checked on them an hour ago, both sleeping soundly." Something in his tone must have alerted her because she frowned slightly. "Is everything all right, Alex?" He considered confronting her then and there, demanding explanations about Chen, the experimental treatments, the money. But the memory of Noah's earnest questions about technology, of Mia's arms around his neck, stopped him. He needed absolute certainty before risking the fragile peace they'd established. "Just work stress," he lied smoothly. "Nothing important." Sophia didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Good night, then." "Sophia," he called as she turned away. "The children. Thank you for raising them to be who they are." Surprise flickered across her face, followed by a soft smile that reminded him painfully of happier times. "They make it easy to do right by them." After she disappeared down the hallway, Alexander returned to his office and pulled up Noah's complete medical records. Files he'd obtained through his considerable influence but hadn't fully reviewed yet, focused as he'd been on current treatment options rather than past history. What he found turned his blood cold. Noah's rare blood disorder had first presented symptoms 3 years ago, shortly after he'd received what was described as an innovative immune therapy at a private clinic in Seoul, a clinic funded by Technova's research division, a clinic where David Chun sat on the board of directors. Alexander leaned back in his chair, the horrible truth becoming clear. His son's illness wasn't natural. It was iatrogenic, caused by experimental treatments derived from stolen Reed Innovations technology. Treatments Chun had convinced Sophia to approve, perhaps under the guise of cutting-edge preventative care. He closed his eyes, imagining Sophia, alone with 2 toddlers in a foreign country, worried about Noah's health, grateful for Chen's apparent generosity and medical connections. The perfect target for manipulation. The question remained, was she an unwitting victim or a willing participant? Alexander looked again at Mia's drawing, the family unit she envisioned, all of them together and happy. In just 2 weeks, the twins had worked their way deep into his heart, crumbling defenses he'd spent years building. And despite everything, despite the unanswered questions and lingering suspicions, he could no longer imagine a life without them in it, including, perhaps, their mother. That realization troubled him most of all. "You're doing great, buddy," Alexander encouraged softly. "Almost done." Noah nodded, his pale face determined. It doesn't hurt as much as the other medicine. Alexander exchanged a glance with Dr. Krishnan over Noah's head. The other medicine? In Seoul. The red one, Noah explained. Uncle David's doctor gave me red medicine that burned. This one just feels cold. Alexander controlled his expression with effort. Uncle David came to your doctor appointments? Noah nodded. He brought presents after, and he asked lots of questions about how I felt. Dr. Krishnan finished the infusion and patted Noah's arm. All done, champion. You handled that like a pro. While the doctor made notes in Noah's chart, Alexander helped his son sit up. You did amazing. How about we stop for ice cream on the way home? Noah's tired face brightened. Can we get some for Mia too? Absolutely, Alexander replied, touched by his son's thoughtfulness. As they were preparing to leave, Dr. Krishnan pulled Alexander aside, his expression grave. I've reviewed all the records from Seoul, he said quietly. I need to speak with you privately about what I found. Alexander nodded. I'll bring Noah home and come back. No need, the doctor replied. I can stop by your house this evening. This is something Mrs. Reed should hear as well. The use of Sophia's former married name startled Alexander, but he didn't correct the doctor. Instead, he focused on getting Noah home and settled with Mia and Lisa for a quiet afternoon of rest and cartoons. Sophia was in the kitchen when they returned, preparing dinner while simultaneously working on what appeared to be gallery inventory on her laptop. How did it go? She asked anxiously, immediately closing her computer and moving to check Noah's temperature with the back of her hand. Like a champ, Alexander said, ruffling Noah's hair gently. Dr. Krishnan was impressed. Noah yawned. Dad said I can have ice cream because I was brave. Sophia's eyes flickered to Alexander at Noah's casual use of dad, something soft passing over her features. Well, that's definitely deserved. Why don't you rest first, though? Lisa can bring your ice cream to the movie room. Once Noah had been settled with his sister and nanny, Alexander followed Sophia back to the kitchen. Dr. Krishnan is coming by tonight to discuss Noah's case. He's reviewed all the Seoul records. Sophia tensed visibly. Did he say what it's about? No, but he seemed concerned. Alexander studied her reaction carefully. Is there something in those records I should know about, Sophia? She hesitated. The treatments in Seoul were unconventional, experimental, but they were helping Noah. His symptoms were stabilizing before we came here. Who recommended these treatments? Alexander pressed. Was it Chun? Sophia's back stiffened. David introduced us to the specialist, yes. He has connections in medical research through his investments. And did you ever question why he was so invested in Noah's care? Why he was willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for experimental treatments? She turned to face him fully, shock evident in her expression. How do you? She stopped herself. You've been investigating me. Us. I've been investigating him, Alexander corrected, and finding very disturbing connections between Chun, the clinic treating our son, and my company's intellectual property. Whatever response Sophia might have made was interrupted by the security system announcing a visitor at the gate. Alexander checked the monitor, expecting to see Dr. Krishnan's car. Instead, he saw a sleek black Bentley he didn't recognize. Are you expecting someone? He asked sharply. Sophia moved to the monitor, her face paling. No, that's David's car. Alexander's jaw tightened. What the hell is he doing here? Before Sophia could answer, the security system pinged again. The camera showed Chun speaking into the intercom, his handsome face composed but determined. I need to speak with Sophia immediately. Chen's voice came through the speaker. It's regarding Noah's treatment protocol. Alexander's protective instincts flared. How does he even know where you are? I told him we were staying with you, Sophia admitted. He's been checking on Noah's progress. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Did you invite him here? No. I specifically said not to visit. She looked genuinely distressed. Alex, please, let me handle this. After a moment's consideration, Alexander nodded curtly. Fine, but we do this together. I want to hear exactly what Chun has to say about my son's treatment. He pressed the intercom button. Mr. Chun, this is Alexander Reed. Please come up to the main house. 5 minutes later, David Chun stood in their foyer, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that rivaled Alexander's own. His confident smile faltering only slightly when he spotted Alexander beside Sophia. I was hoping to speak with Sophia privately, Chun said, his accent revealing hints of his Hong Kong education. Anything regarding my son's medical care can be said in front of me, Alexander replied coldly. Chen's expression registered surprise, then calculation. Your son. Yes, I suppose biologically speaking. He turned to Sophia with practiced concern. I received the latest lab work from Dr. Park in Seoul. There are concerning patterns that Dr. Krishnan may not be equipped to recognize. Dr. Krishnan is the foremost expert in this field, Alexander countered. And he's coming here tonight to discuss Noah's treatment plan. The American approach is unfortunately outdated, Chun said dismissively. The protocol we developed in Seoul. You mean the experimental treatments using proprietary technology stolen from my company? Alexander interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Chen's composure slipped momentarily. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Reed. The treatments helping Noah were developed independently by researchers at the Kim Medical Institute, a subsidiary of Technova's biotech division. Alexander shot back. Where you conveniently sit on the board. Sophia looked between them, confusion evident. What are you both talking about? Chun recovered quickly, offering Sophia his most charming smile. Corporate rivalries. Nothing that should concern us when Noah's health is at stake. He reached for her hand. Sophia, I've arranged for Dr. Park to come to Los Angeles. He can continue Noah's original treatment protocol, the one that was actually working. Alexander stepped forward. Noah is receiving the proper treatment now, not some experimental knockoff that caused his condition in the first place. Caused his condition? Sophia echoed, pulling her hand from Chen's. David, what is he talking about? Chen's expression hardened. Alexander is attempting to manipulate you as usual. He abandoned you for his precious company once before. Now he's fabricating conspiracy theories to regain control. That's rich coming from a corporate spy who's been using my family to gain access to proprietary medical technology, Alexander retorted. Your family? Chun laughed incredulously. Where were you for the past 5 years? While Sophia struggled to care for sick children alone. While she rebuilding her life piece by piece. I was there. I provided for them when you didn't even know they existed. The accusation hit its mark. Alexander felt the familiar guilt surge, but pushed it aside. And now we know why. It was never about helping Sophia. It was about using my son as a test subject for stolen technology. That's absurd, Chun scoffed. Noah received cutting-edge care that saved his life. Care that wouldn't have been possible without my intervention. Care that made him sick in the first place, Alexander insisted. Stop it, both of you. Sophia's voice cut through their argument. You're talking about Noah like he's some kind of corporate asset instead of a child. She turned to Chen, her expression hardening. David, what exactly was in those treatments you recommended? The truth. Chen's expression became carefully neutral. Advanced immune modulators based on neural reprogramming. Highly specialized. And the coincidental similarity to Reed Innovations' patented technology? She pressed. Scientific advancement often follows parallel paths, Chun said smoothly. But that's hardly relevant now. What matters is continuing Noah's care with doctors who understand his unique case. Chun moved toward Sophia, his voice softening into the persuasive tone of a man used to getting his way. Sophia, be reasonable. You've seen how Noah responds to Dr. Park's protocol. This new treatment is an unknown risk. The risk, Alexander interjected coldly, was allowing untested medications to be administered to a healthy child. Medications that altered his immune response and created the very condition they claimed to treat. Sophia's face drained of color. Is that true? Chun shot Alexander a venomous look. Of course not. Noah's condition is genetic, rare but documented. Then explain why the symptoms only appeared after his first preventative treatment at your clinic, Alexander challenged. Explain why the condition doesn't appear anywhere in either of our family medical histories. Before Chun could respond, the security system announced another arrival, Dr. Krishnan. Perfect timing, Alexander said grimly. Now we can get some expert opinion on exactly what's been done to my son. 20 minutes later, they sat in Alexander's study, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Dr. Krishnan had laid out a series of medical charts, test results, and comparison analyses that painted a disturbing picture. Based on my review, the doctor explained clinically, Noah's condition appears to have been iatrogenically induced, meaning caused by medical intervention. The preventative therapy, administered in Seoul 3 years ago, contained modified neural interfacing agents structurally identical to those in development at several research facilities, including Reed Innovations. Sophia covered her mouth in horror. You're saying the treatments made him sick? The evidence strongly suggests that, yes, Dr. Krishnan confirmed. What's more concerning is that the subsequent treatments administered were designed to manage symptoms rather than reverse the underlying cause. They essentially created dependence on continued therapy. That's preposterous, Chun objected. Dr. Park is a respected physician who lost his license in Japan for ethical violations before you recruited him. Dr. Krishnan interrupted calmly. I've taken the liberty of contacting medical authorities. His credentials and research are currently under investigation. Alexander watched as Sophia turned to Chen, betrayal etched across her face. You told me Noah needed those treatments to survive, that they were his only hope. Chen's expression remained impassive. I believed they were. I still do. The treatments were perpetuating his condition, Dr. Krishnan said firmly, not curing it. Alexander couldn't contain himself any longer. Why Chen? Why target my family specifically? A flicker of something, calculation, perhaps regret, crossed Chen's face before his mask of concern returned. I simply wanted to help Sophia when she was alone and desperate. The medical recommendations were made in good faith. Bullshit, Alexander said bluntly. You sought her out deliberately. You positioned yourself as her savior while feeding information back to Technova about the results of experimental treatments on my son. He stepped closer to Chun. Did you know who they were from the beginning? Did someone at Technova identify Sophia as my ex-wife? This paranoia is exactly why Sophia left you, Chun deflected. Everything becomes a conspiracy, a business threat. Answer the question, Alexander insisted. A tense silence filled the room before Chun finally spoke. Yes, he admitted. I knew who she was, who the children were. Technova had been monitoring your activities for years. When Sophia resurfaced in Seoul with your children, it presented an opportunity. Sophia inhaled sharply. You used us. You used my son's health to what? Spy on Alexander's company. It was more complicated than that, Chun said, his voice hardening. The treatments Noah received were revolutionary, yes, based on concepts similar to Reed's work, but improved upon, enhanced. Noah benefited from cutting-edge care no ordinary child could access. Care that made him sick, Sophia cried. Care that gave him abilities beyond normal children, Chun countered, then immediately looked as though he regretted the words. Alexander went completely still. What did you just say? Chen's expression closed. Nothing. I misspoke. No, you didn't, Alexander said quietly, a terrible suspicion forming. What abilities? Dr. Krishnan was frowning deeply now, reviewing the charts with renewed interest. These neural markers, they're consistent with enhanced cognitive processing. The kind of patterns we see in accelerated intelligence, Chun finished, a hint of pride creeping into his voice despite himself. Noah's analytical abilities, his memory capacity, his pattern recognition, all enhanced by the treatment protocol. Alexander felt physically ill. You experimented on my son. You altered his brain chemistry without consent. With Sophia's consent, Chun corrected coldly. She signed all the necessary paperwork. Papers I couldn't even read properly. Sophia protested. Documents in medical Korean that you summarized for me. You said they were standard consent forms for conventional treatments. Alexander stepped between Chan and Sophia, his voice deadly calm. You're going to leave my home now, and if you ever come near my family again, I will destroy you so thoroughly that Tech Nova won't even remember your name. Chun straightened his jacket, his composure returning. This isn't over, Reed. Noah needs continued treatment. Treatment only our protocols can provide. Without it, there could be complications. The implied threat hung in the air. Are you threatening my son? Alexander asked, stepping closer. I'm stating medical fact, Chun replied smoothly. Noah's system has adapted to our protocols. Disrupting them could have consequences. Get out, Alexander said, each word precisely enunciated. Now, as Chun moved toward the door, he paused beside Sophia. I did care for you, he said quietly. That wasn't all pretense. Sophia's expression was stone. But it was enough pretense to use my son as a laboratory experiment. To make him sick so you could test your stolen technology. Chun didn't respond to the accusation. Instead, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small USB drive, placing it on the nearby side table. Noah's complete treatment protocol. You'll need it eventually. He glanced at Dr. Krishnan. When your approach fails. After Chun departed, Dr. Krishnan gathered his materials. I'll need to run additional tests based on this new information, but I believe we can develop a proper treatment plan, one that will gradually wean Noah off the dependency these protocols created. Will he be okay? Sophia asked, her voice small. I believe so, the doctor assured her. Children are remarkably resilient, and the enhanced cognitive functions, if they exist, appear stable. Our goal will be to maintain those while eliminating the negative immune responses. After the doctor left, Sophia collapsed onto the sofa, her face buried in her hands. I let this happen, she whispered. I trusted him. I let him experiment on our son. Alexander sat beside her, anger warring with the instinct to comfort. You didn't know. I should have questioned more, should have gotten second opinions. Should have. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I was so desperate to help Noah, to prove I could manage everything myself. To not need you. The raw admission hung between them. Where are the twins now? Alexander asked after a moment. Still with Lisa in the movie room. I checked on them before the doctor arrived. They're both asleep. Alexander nodded, then made a decision. They stay here tonight. We'll explain everything tomorrow. But tonight, they need normalcy and rest. Sophia wiped her tears, nodding in agreement. What about Chun? Will he really stay away? No, Alexander said honestly. Men like Chun don't give up easily, especially with so much at stake. He ran a hand through his hair, mind racing with contingency plans. We need to increase security, and I need to contact my legal team, both corporate and family law. Family law? Sophia looked up sharply. You're still planning to fight me for custody? Alexander met her gaze directly. No, I'm planning to protect our family from Chun and Technova. And to do that, we need to present a united front, legally and otherwise. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You mean? I mean we need to behave like a family, in all the ways that matter. He held her gaze. Starting now. The implications of his statement hung between them, not quite a reconciliation, not merely an alliance of convenience, but something in between. A truce forged in crisis, with their children's well-being at its center. Okay, she whispered. What's our next move? Alexander's expression hardened with determination. We fight back, and we keep our children safe, whatever it takes. He found Sophia in the kitchen, dark circles beneath her eyes suggesting she'd had as little sleep as he had. The twins still asleep? He asked, reaching for the coffee she'd prepared. She nodded. Noah's usually tired the day after treatment. Mia tends to sleep in when he does. She hesitated before adding, I spoke with Dr. Krishnan again this morning. He's arranging for a specialist in neurodevelopmental medicine to consult on Noah's case. Good. Alexander glanced at his watch. My security team will be here at 9 to implement new protocols. They'll need to take biometric data from all of us, including the children. Sophia wrapped her hands around her mug, her knuckles white. Do you really think Chun would try to take them? The question hung in the air, giving voice to their shared